You've watched someone with half your capability get chosen ahead of you, nodding congratulations, while something inside turned to stone. You've given endlessly, watching people walk past you toward those who gave nothing. You felt the silent humiliation of realizing your kindness never built loyalty, it built expectation. You've wondered why rooms treat you as a resource instead of a rare event. You've been prepared, considerate, and completely forgettable. You can no longer ignore the pattern. Here is the lie you were fed. If you are generous and useful enough, the world will notice. It won't. The world never rewards what it can access for free. Everything you have given away without a price, the world quietly repriced to zero. Not because it lacked value, because it lacked positioning. You are here because this pattern has finally cracked wide enough to demand an answer. This is a fork. On one side is the accessible, exhausted giver you were trained to be. On the other is the single law separating the irreplaceable from the replaceable. The next 30 minutes will not be a lecture, they will be an initiation. Read that line again. It is not describing money, it is describing you. Every unpriced hour, every reflexive yes, every silent absorption of someone else's chaos. These are currencies you spent while being watched, weighed, and quietly repriced. The system relies on your compliance. Endlessly available people are the load-bearing walls of institutions that would collapse without them. You were taught being needed meant being valued. It is the opposite. The needed are used, the valued are chosen. Count the relationships where you are the reliable one, the first to check in, adjust, and forgive. Now count how many would notice if you disappeared for a month. That gap is evidence of a positioning mistake so old you forgot making it. There is one correction to this error, a virtue Machiavelli called the hardest to master, that I will withhold until the final movement. Understand it too soon, and you will misuse it. By the end, you will understand why your own strategy made you invisible. You will see the price tag you have worn your entire life and learn how to rewrite it. You will not learn to be colder. You will learn to become expensive. When you do, those who once walked past you will walk toward you, and those who demanded your energy will negotiate for a fraction of your attention. This is dark psychology as a shield, Machiavellian strategy as a compass, Jungian shadow work applied to the problem you cannot solve alone. If these ideas resonate with you, hit that subscribe button for more top-tier content. Also, drop an expensive in the comments so I know you're ready. Let's dive in. Everything the market can access without cost, the market price is at zero. This is not cynicism. It is the oldest law of value, and it applies to human beings with the same indifference it applies to commodities. You have been told in 1,000 different phrasings that if your work is good enough, it will speak for itself. It will not. Value that has no price attached to it does not enter a person's calculation of what is valuable. It enters their calculation of what is available. Those are not the same thing. Available things are used. Valuable things are protected, pursued, and prioritized. And the single distinction between the two is whether a price has been placed on access. Think about the last time you extended yourself for someone who did not ask twice. You explained something you had spent years learning in a 5-minute conversation and watched them absorb it without registering what it cost you to make it that clear. You covered for a colleague, and the covering became your job description within a month. You listened deeply and attentively to someone who could not have located you on a map of their emotional priorities the following week. Each of these was an act of value. Each was received as an act of availability. The confusion between the two is not their failure of gratitude. It is your failure of positioning. Machiavelli wrote that the ruler who is generous with everyone will eventually be considered contemptible by everyone. That sentence is not a comment on selfishness. It is a diagnosis of what happens to the perceived worth of anything that flows continuously and without cost. Human attention, human effort, human presence, these are governed by the same law that governs water and air. The moment they become guaranteed, they stop being noticed. The moment they stop being noticed, they stop being valued. And the moment they stop being valued, the person providing them stops existing in the perception of the people receiving them. You do not disappear because you are unremarkable. You disappear because you are unpriced. And here is the part that will sit with you tonight in a way you may not initially welcome. You have known this. Some quiet, older part of you has known this since you were young enough to be corrected for saying no. You learned that access was the currency of belonging, and you spent that currency until you were bankrupt, and you called your bankruptcy virtue. That is not a character flaw. That is a survival strategy that has outlived its usefulness, and there is a specific mechanism that keeps replicating it in every new environment you enter, which is the pattern we are going to walk directly into next. Generosity's every act of unconditional giving trains the receiver to expect the next one. This is not because people are ungrateful. It is because the human nervous system is calibrated to establish baselines. And once a baseline is established, anything at or below that baseline registers as nothing. You gave freely and freely became the floor. Then you gave a little more and a little more became the floor. And the day you gave what you had and had nothing left to give, they did not perceive that you had given everything. They perceived that you had suddenly withdrawn something they were entitled to. This is not their moral failure. This is the mathematics of expectation, and Machiavellian strategy has understood it for 500 years. The generosity trap has a specific shape, and once you see it, you will recognize it in every drained relationship of your life. It begins when you offer something the other person did not ask for. It escalates when they accept without comment, because acceptance without comment is the sound of a baseline being set. It hardens when you continue to give at that level for long enough that the giving becomes invisible, not to you, but to them. And it closes when you attempt to renegotiate, at which point you discover that you have no negotiating position because everything you would have used as leverage has already been given away for free. You will notice, if you look, that the people in your life who ask for the most are precisely the ones you have given the most to. You may have interpreted this as evidence that they are needier or more entitled or somehow of lower character. It is not. It is evidence that you have trained them. The signal you sent every time you offered without being asked was that your presence, your energy, your loyalty, and your patience were resources that operated on a different economy than the rest of their world, and they have simply been consuming according to the economy you built for them. You constructed a version of yourself with no price, and they have been shopping in your store without paying, and you have been quietly furious with them for the exact arrangement you designed. Now here is the sentence you will sit with for a long time. The private math you have been running for years, the invisible ledger of how much you have given versus how much you have received, is not a moral document. It is a receipt for a store you forgot to charge in. And the reason no one else has ever validated that ledger is that you are the only one who ever saw the prices on it. Everyone else saw a sign on the door that said, "Take what you need." That is what unpriced generosity looks like from the outside, not saintliness, not sacrifice, a sign on the door. And this is where the trap sharpens. Because the moment you begin to feel the exhaustion of unreciprocated giving, the same conditioning that got you here will offer you a single, catastrophic solution. Give more, better, faster, in the hope that this time they will finally see it. They will not. The 48 laws of power and every serious framework of psychological positioning agree on this single point. Escalating what you have already priced at zero does not raise its value. It confirms it. Which brings us to the specific pattern that has been happening to you in rooms, in relationships, and in workplaces without you being able to name it, a pattern with a name so precise it will feel like recognition rather than information. There is a moment in every relationship and every environment where you have been the reliable one, when you cross an invisible threshold and stop being seen as a person and start being seen as an amenity. Machiavelli would have called this becoming furniture. You did not become furniture because you were unremarkable. You became furniture because you were continuously present, endlessly accommodating, and always available on request. The nervous systems of the people around you gradually stopped registering you as a distinct presence and started registering you as part of the room. This is the furniture effect, and it is the specific mechanism by which good people become invisible. You have felt the furniture effect from the inside without having the language for it. It is the sensation of speaking in a meeting and watching your idea get ignored, then hearing the same idea come out of another mouth 20 minutes later to nods and approval. It is the moment you realize the friend you have been supporting through every crisis of the last 2 years cannot name a single crisis you have been navigating in the same period. It is the specific quiet flatness of being thanked in the general terms one uses for a utility rather than the specific terms one uses for a person. You are not misinterpreting these moments. You are correctly reading the signals of a system that has categorized you as infrastructure rather than as presence. And here is the reversal most people never make because their pride will not let them. The furniture effect is not something being done to you. It is something you are actively maintaining every day through the specific choices that make you constantly accessible. Every immediate reply, every dropped plan when someone else needed something, every clarification of what you meant when they misunderstood you, every apology for occupying space that was already yours. These are not neutral acts of kindness. They are structural investments in your own invisibility. You are paying, in small daily installments, for the exact positioning you resent. The Jungian frame on this is unforgiving and liberating in the same breath. Carl Jung theorized that the traits we most vigorously suppress in ourselves, the traits we call cold, selfish, or unavailable, do not disappear. They accumulate in what he called the shadow, and they generate the exact life circumstances that would force us to develop them, if we ever wanted to be whole. The reason your life keeps producing situations in which you are drained, overlooked, and taken for granted is not that the universe is cruel. It is that a part of you that knows how to hold a boundary, name a price, and disappear without explanation has been waiting for years to be integrated. Your shadow is not your enemy. Your shadow is the sovereign self you were forbidden to become. And every furniture effect relationship in your life is a request from your own psyche to finally develop that part of you. Notice right now what happens in your chest when you consider becoming someone who does not respond immediately, who does not explain themselves, who does not compensate for other people's expectations. If there is a small, immediate voice saying that would make you a bad person, that voice is not your conscience. That voice is the conditioning that has been keeping you accessible, unpriced, and invisible. And if you have followed this line of thought without recoiling, you have already crossed a threshold that most viewers will not cross. This is not a channel for the casually curious. What comes next is the specific reversal that separates the ones who understand this material from the ones who will click away and forget it before morning. Here is the law that reorganizes everything. Value is not created by what you provide. Value is created by the relationship between what you provide and how difficult it is to access. This is why scarcity is the single most powerful force in the psychology of power, and it is why the strategist who becomes deliberately scarce becomes strategically irreplaceable, not because they have suddenly become more talented, but because they have finally attached a price to the access they were previously handing out for free. This is the scarcity reversal, and it is the exact inversion of every instinct you have been trained to obey. Machiavelli wrote that a prince who is careful and deliberate with what he gives becomes the object of gratitude, while a prince who gives constantly becomes the object of contempt. This is not because gratitude is a moral response to scarcity. It is because the human mind cannot register the value of what it can always have. Deliberate withholding is not cruelty. It is the act of restoring the perceptual conditions under which your presence, your attention, and your effort can register as significant events rather than as background noise. When you become slightly less available, the people who genuinely value you begin to notice you again, and the people who never valued you begin to reveal themselves by leaving. Both of these are gifts. The internal shift feels like this. You stop replying the instant a message arrives, and you notice that the world does not end. You decline an invitation without offering a 3-sentence justification, and you notice that the person accepts it without collapse. You allow a silence to sit in a conversation without rushing to fill it, and you notice that the other person leans in rather than turning away. You realize that every explanation you used to give was not a courtesy. It was a small tax you were paying for the right to occupy space. And the moment you stop paying that tax, the room reorganizes itself around you in ways you had always assumed were reserved for a different kind of person. Feel this for a moment. Imagine 6 months from now that you no longer feel the compulsive need to justify your absence, your silence, or your no. You wake up and your first thought is not who needs you. Your first thought is what you are building. You move through your day with the specific quiet gravity of someone whose attention is a resource that has been repriced. You are still kind. You are still generous. But your kindness now has a price, and your generosity now has a direction, and both are yours to allocate rather than yours to surrender. The people around you begin to treat you differently, and the strangest part of that shift is that you did not perform anything to earn it. You simply stopped underwriting your own devaluation. This is what strategic detachment actually produces. Not coldness, not cruelty. A recalibration of the entire economy of your presence, in which the people who deserve your attention receive its full weight, and the people who were consuming it out of habit lose access to something they had been taking without understanding what they were taking. This is high-value man psychology in its true form. The value comes not from what you own or what you achieve, but from the frame of scarcity you build around what you offer, and the mechanism by which you actually implement that frame in the specific relationships and rooms of your real life is what we are going to walk into now. Every person you interact with is running a calculation, whether or not they know it, about the cost of engaging with you. When that cost is zero, they engage impulsively, discard casually, and never remember the exchange. When that cost is calibrated, they engage deliberately, receive attentively, and remember every word. Your task is not to raise the cost through hostility or withdrawal. Your task is to raise the cost by restoring the accurate relationship between the value of what you provide and the effort required to access it. This is what it means in practice to become expensive. Begin with time. The single fastest way to reprice your presence in another person's perception is to stop responding as if their timing is your emergency. A message received at 9 in the morning does not require a 9:02 reply. A message received during dinner does not require a mid-meal reply. A message received on a weekend does not require a weekend reply. When you allow reasonable time to pass between a request and your response, you are not being rude. You are teaching the other person the accurate speed of your attention. And you will be startled by how quickly people who once expected instantaneous access begin to treat delayed access as a privilege. Continue with explanation. The compulsion to over-explain is one of the most reliable markers of unpriced positioning. Notice, in your next several interactions, how often you feel the need to provide reasons for perfectly ordinary choices. You do not owe an explanation for why you cannot attend. You do not owe a paragraph justifying why you would rather not. You do not owe context for a boundary you have every right to hold. Each explanation you offer is an admission that you believed you needed permission, and the mere act of providing it invites the other person to evaluate whether your reasons are sufficient. Sovereign minds do not audition their reasons. They name their position, and they let the position stand. And here is where the deeper discomfort arrives, because I have been circling it, and it is time to name it directly. You have not been giving out of love for the last many years. You have been giving out of a specific, quiet fear that if you stopped, you would lose the fragile version of belonging you had constructed. You confused being needed with being loved, and you built a life on the difference. This is not a shameful discovery. It is a precise one, and precision is what allows change. The moment you can see, without flinching, that your generosity has been an audition for a role that was never actually available, you become the one thing that generosity could never make you. You become the one who no longer needs to audition. That single shift will do more for your social presence than a decade of self-improvement could do, and it will do it in weeks. Some of you feel resistance to this. Some of you are thinking that becoming this deliberate about your attention would make you a lesser person. I want to be direct with you. That thought is not your morality speaking. That thought is your training speaking. The conditioning that installed the equation between availability and virtue is the same conditioning that has kept you exhausted, unappreciated, and quietly furious for most of your adult life. And the ones who continue to listen past this moment without flinching are the ones who have already begun to hear the difference between the voice of their integrity and the voice of their conditioning. That distinction is not available to everyone. It is available to the ones who were built to eventually see it. The rest of what remains is for you. Being impossible to replace is not a matter of skill. It is a matter of frame. There are people in every field, in every industry, in every social circle, whose objective competence is unremarkable, but whose position is unshakable. And there are people of extraordinary talent who spend their entire careers being replaceable by anyone with a slightly better resume. The difference is not what they can do. The difference is the frame of scarcity they built around themselves before anyone thought to price them. The irreplaceable are not the best. The irreplaceable are the ones who understood positioning before they understood performance. This is the psychology of power at its purest, and it is available to you the moment you stop refusing to use it. You have been operating under a hidden assumption that if you became good enough, indispensable enough, useful enough, your value would eventually be recognized. This assumption is the exact reason it never has been. Recognition is not granted to the useful. Recognition is granted to the rare. And rarity is a construction, not a fact. You construct rarity every time you decline what does not serve you. Allocate your energy toward what compounds, and refuse to be the general resource that anyone can draw from. Every time you choose depth over accessibility, you are building the specific quality, the quality Machiavelli called gravitas, that makes a human being impossible to replace. This is not detachment for its own sake. This is detachment as the architecture of a self that finally has weight. And now the reversal beneath the reversal. Becoming expensive is not about withholding, it is about the frame that withholding creates. The tactics of delayed response, calibrated availability, and unexplained boundaries are not the point. The point is who you become when you stop treating your presence as a public utility. The point is the specific interior gravity that develops in a person who no longer negotiates against themselves. That gravity is not performed. It cannot be faked, and it cannot be learned as a technique. It is the natural byproduct of a mind that has finally understood the difference between being useful and being valuable, and has chosen the second without apology. That is what people are actually responding to when they respond to the irreplaceable. Not the tactics, the gravity. Which brings us back to the price tag I mentioned in the opening minutes, the one I said I would not fully explain until the end. You have been walking through your life wearing a price tag. You did not know it. Every person you met read it in the first 90 seconds of the interaction. It was not a number that other people wrote on you. It was a number you wrote on yourself in the specific accumulation of every apology, every reflexive yes, every explanation you offered when none was required, every hour you gave to people who never asked what an hour of your life was worth. That number is why the rooms of your life have treated you the way they have treated you. And that number is the one thing you have always had and always will have, the sole authority to change. So here is the truth that you could not have received in the opening minutes of this video, because you had not yet made the journey that would let you hear it. You were never overlooked because you lacked worth. You were overlooked because you had never priced your worth, and unpriced worth cannot register in any economy. Machiavelli understood this in the courts of Florence, and Jung understood it in the consulting rooms of Zurich, and both of them arrived at the same conclusion by different paths. The self that gives without limit is not a saint. It is a self that has not yet met its own shadow, and the shadow has been waiting patiently to give you back the sovereignty that your conditioning taught you to surrender. You do not have to become cold. You do not have to become cruel. You have to become expensive in the specific sense that your presence, your attention, your loyalty, and your effort are no longer available at the price of zero. You have to allow the world to feel the accurate weight of what you provide. And you do this not by demanding it, but by declining to underwrite your own devaluation. The moment you stop paying the tax of over-explanation, over-availability, and over-accommodation, the perception of your worth reorganizes itself around the accurate frame. This is not a technique you perform. This is a self you finally allow yourself to be. Picture the version of you that has lived inside this shift for a year. You walk into a room, and the room adjusts to your presence rather than the reverse. You do not speak first, and the silence does not frighten you. When you do speak, people lean toward you, not because you have raised your volume, but because you have finally raised your frame. The people who once demanded your energy are now respectful of your time, and the ones who could not respect your time are no longer in your life, and their absence feels like relief rather than loss. You are kinder than you have ever been, because kindness that costs something is finally worth something. And the strangest, quietest change of all is that you no longer feel the ancient need to be chosen. You have chosen yourself, and the world, which has always mirrored self-selection, has begun to choose you in return. If this reached the part of you it was meant to reach, drop the word irreplaceable in the comments. Not as a promise to me, but as a declaration to yourself. It is a small act. It is also a first repricing. This is not a channel for casual viewing. This is a slow initiation into the psychology the rest of the world was never given access to, and the ones who stay are the ones who were built to eventually walk through this door. If you have felt, at any point in the last 30 minutes, that a hidden part of you was finally being addressed in language it recognized, subscribe. Not because you owe me anything, because the next video is going to sharpen what this one opened, and the one after that is going to build on it. And if you leave now, you will forget by morning, and the version of you that watched this will still be wearing the same price tag tomorrow. Sovereign minds do not accumulate information. They compound initiation. This is where that compounding happens. And whatever you do, don't stop now. The on-screen video matters more than you think. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. I'll see you there. See what others miss. Know what others fear. Become who others can't.